Imagine you are the education minister of a developing country, and suddenly you have a huge new budget. You decide to use that money to raise the learning level of children in remote areas. What would you do? In Peru, the government chose to give children computers. They launched a one laptop per child program in rural schools. Computers are a basic tool of modern productivity. Poor families often cannot afford them, so if the government gives them away for free, that sounds like a wonderful idea, right? But some researchers were not convinced. Yes, computers are useful. But do they actually help children learn? As it turned out, the Peruvian program was part of a much larger educational experiment. Between 2006 and 2012, nearly 10 million laptops were distributed across 20 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Economists and education researchers followed the results for more than a decade. In 2025, the answer became clear. The laptops made no significant positive difference in academic performance, either in the short term or the long term. Students who received them did not improve in math or reading. Their grade progression rate did not rise. In fact, it fell by about 1 percentage point. The only skill that improved was computer operation. To me, this feels like a modern parable. Giving children computers is very much like the way many schools and parents think about education. They see learning as a big, abstract problem, or even a hardware problem. A child is struggling in school? Then spend money. Send them to tutoring. Transfer them to a better school. Upgrade the learning environment. Buy better equipment. Add more stationery. Spend money, and everyone feels more at ease. But learning is not a macro problem. Learning is a micro problem. It is a process of neural reorganization. You have to think all the way down to the level of neural processing. When a child sits at a desk, how exactly does something called knowledge get into their brain? Today's topic is the first lecture in our education and learning section, and it is one of the most rigorous and engineering-like models in modern educational psychology, cognitive load theory. I'd bet that most teachers, and even some people who call themselves education experts, have never heard of it. But this may be the single most important theory for parents and teachers to understand. Once you understand it, you'll see why so much of education is simply being done wrong. Cognitive load theory was first proposed in the 1980s by Australian educational psychologist John Sweller, and has been refined ever since by him and many other researchers. Sweller's question was simple. If someone keeps failing to learn, and says, "My brain just isn't enough," is the problem the hard drive or the memory? The answer is not the hard drive. The brain's long-term memory is, for practical purposes, almost unlimited. It can store books, words, skills, experiences, movies, and years of life without running out of space. The bottleneck is the memory, meaning the brain's working memory. Working memory has very limited bandwidth. Most people can only process about 4 to 7 pieces of information at once. If those pieces are not written into long-term memory in time, they are forgotten. So the essence of learning is this. External information enters a narrow working memory, gets processed there, and is then packaged into long-term memory. The core insight of cognitive load theory is that learning fails not because the hard drive is full, but because the new information gets stuck at the narrow gate of working memory. When information pours into the brain, the total pressure placed on working memory is called cognitive load. It is usually divided into 3 types. First is intrinsic load, the complexity built into the material itself. How many elements must be processed together? Second is extraneous load. Irrelevant information that steals attention and wastes mental bandwidth. This includes noise, distractions, and even badly designed teaching. Third is germane load. The useful effort that goes into turning knowledge into long-term memory, the effort that truly builds understanding. More recent research, including a 2023 paper by Sweller himself, suggests that germane load does not need to be treated as a separate category. The simple practical lesson is this. To learn effectively, reduce extraneous load as much as possible so that working memory can focus on intrinsic load. Now you can see why giving children computers does not improve learning. A computer is a distraction machine. It adds extraneous load. So why do some children learn quickly while others seem unable to learn at all? Is it because they have larger working memories? Not really. The difference in working memory capacity between people is not that large. Cognitive load theory introduces another crucial concept, schema. The key idea is that long-term memory does not store knowledge as isolated fragments. Instead, it stores structured units called schemas. A schema is a bundled cognitive structure that packages multiple related elements into one meaningful whole. You can think of it as a chunk of knowledge, or even a compressed file. For a child just learning to read, the 7 characters in
中华人民共和国
are 7 separate pieces of information. That is a lot of load. But for you, those 7 characters are already bundled into one schema. The People's Republic of China. To your brain, that only takes 1 slot. That is why weak students struggle and strong students understand quickly. Weak students do not yet have enough schemas. So they see a pile of disconnected fragments, and their cognitive load becomes too high. Strong students already have the relevant schemas, so the same information appears in larger chunks. They process fewer separate elements, so they do not overload. Take this equation. 3x plus 2 equals 15. A strong student already has schemas for the distributive law and for moving terms across the equals sign. They see the problem and automatically activate those schemas. To them, the problem may even feel boring. But a weak student sees separate pieces. What does the parenthesis mean? Do I multiply the 3 in? Or do I subtract 2 first? Their working memory is already overloaded. So from the perspective of cognitive load theory, how hard a learning material is does not depend only on how much information it objectively contains. It depends on how much information it contains for your brain. If you already have the right schemas, the material is small. If you do not, the material becomes huge. In other words, strong students learn faster not because their brains are bigger or faster, but because their brains already contain more compression files. That is the compounding effect of learning. The more schemas you have, the faster you can learn new things. The more books you have read, the faster you can read new books. Learning is not the process of moving facts into the brain one by one. It is the process of compressing and calling up schemas. So why do people say, weak students have too much stationery? Because the weak student already has too few schemas, so intrinsic load is overloaded. Then the teacher explains badly, or adds unnecessary decoration, or fills the blackboard with colorful cartoons and says, "Do you understand now?" Then the father sees the child still not understanding and starts yelling, adding even more extraneous load. Then the mother feels the child needs help, so she buys a pile of bright highlighters, correction notebooks, sticky notes, and colorful pens. These tools create a fake sense of control. The child then highlights everything in 3 colors, as if that alone will make knowledge enter the brain. How is the child supposed to learn under those conditions? The reason weak students remain weak is often precisely because they are surrounded by too much noise. Real learning requires a clean information environment. Good teaching should remove extraneous load as much as possible. It should explain things as simply as possible. It should reduce the burden on working memory and clear a path into long-term memory. From this perspective, many classrooms are not really teaching. They are performing. They are providing emotional satisfaction to adults. From cognitive load theory, I think we can distill 4 practical principles. 1. Manage intrinsic load. When teachers see weak students, the instinct is to lower difficulty. But that is not really the point. The issue is not difficulty alone. It is bandwidth. Good teaching does not flatten the mountain. It builds a ladder. It carefully controls the pace at which schemas are introduced into the brain. If students do not yet have the relevant schemas, do not begin with a big comprehensive problem. Break complex knowledge into smaller schemas first. Teach in chunks. Activate prior knowledge first. Automate the parts one by one. Then integrate them. Let the student stand firmly on one step before showing them the next one. People often say weak students lack fundamentals. What that really means is that the schemas were never properly built. 2. Use direct instruction. For decades, education has been obsessed with romantic ideas about exploratory learning. The teacher should not give direct answers. Children should discover everything themselves, in authentic situations. But many studies have shown that this approach is very inefficient. Why? Because it imposes too much cognitive load. If you give a beginner a problem and ask them to discover the solution on their own, their brain has to do too many things at once. Look at the problem. Guess the goal. Search for steps. Try something. Compare the current state with the target state. And also figure out what the teacher wants. All of their working memory gets consumed by search. There is hardly any capacity left for recognizing patterns. For school knowledge, the most effective method is usually direct instruction. One of the strongest methods is worked examples. On the left side of the board, the teacher shows a fully solved example. On the right side, there is a structurally identical practice problem with different numbers. The student copies the example structure and applies it. That simple method is one of the fastest ways to write a schema into the brain. Later, once the student has mastered the pattern, you gradually fade the guidance. That is called guidance fading. You do not forbid exploration forever. But first, you reduce the cost of searching. Only then can you raise the level of understanding. 3. Eliminate extraneous load. People often say poor learning is caused by lack of concentration. But you also have to create conditions where concentration is possible. Chatting and playing with a computer are obviously distracting. But so is a parent constantly supervising, bringing snacks, asking questions, and buying more stationery every few minutes. From the perspective of cognitive load theory, even dramatic multimedia teaching is often harmful. Decorative slides, flying animations, text on one side and explanation on the other, the teacher speaking and the screen repeating the same thing, video lessons that cannot be paused, learning platforms with more buttons than content. None of that is teaching innovation. It is cognitive pollution. Isn't the content already enough for the student to look at? You do not need to force their eyes to jump back and forth across the screen. A picture plus spoken explanation is better than a picture plus a wall of text. Sometimes flashy teaching can make students more interested. But flashy does not mean effective. 4. Teach strong students and weak students differently. This is not about labeling people. And it does not mean weak students are permanently weak. They can absolutely become strong later. It just means their current schema base is not enough yet. A 2025 meta-analysis made the conclusion very clear. Students with low prior knowledge benefit more from highly guided teaching. Students with high prior knowledge benefit more from less guided teaching. For weak students, teachers should use more explicit cues, more worked examples, more repetition of the same type of problem, and slower pacing. Fewer jumps. Fewer open-ended tasks. Less self-search. For strong students, the problem is the opposite. They already have plenty of schemas, so they need enough intrinsic load to stay engaged. Otherwise they get bored. So for strong students, you should repeat less, fade guidance faster, and give more varied problems and more transfer tasks. Let them explore more. This also means that putting 40 students in a classroom and teaching them all the same way is a very inefficient system. Education should be personalized. And that brings us to AI. The bad news is that several studies have found that AI can actually damage students' learning. Many students now treat ChatGPT as a homework machine. As a result, their performance on surprise tests drops significantly. Why? Because they outsource the very process that should have become schema building. The brain never experiences the load, so the neural connections never form. The schema never develops. The good news is that, if you strictly limit AI's role to that of a tutor, meaning it breaks complex knowledge into smaller schemas, removes irrelevant load, and guides you step by step instead of giving direct answers, then learning with AI can outperform traditional classroom learning. Many people think learning is a kind of suffering. But learning is really an engineering problem. Teaching is programming the brain. Cognitive load theory tells us that the human brain is a highly constrained biological device. You cannot simply dump information into it. You have to respect its input bandwidth. You have to build knowledge gradually, in the right order, at the right pace, until it becomes schemas. Even if brain-computer interfaces become much more advanced in the future, I still do not think humans will be able to directly download a skill. Neurons are made of flesh. That is the most important hard limit in learning and education. That's it for today's content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.